Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And once again, I'll have another comic book gem that I'd like to share from that ever-evolving world. But, like many other gems, this particular comic comes with some unique qualities that really help it stand out. You see, if you only know Marvel through movies, TV shows, cartoons, and games, you really only have a tiny taste of what makes Marvel so great. Because the foundation of that greatness emerged directly from the comics. Going all the way back to the days of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, this is the fertile ground from which so much awesome grows. And for lifelong Marvel fans who follow the comics, they can really help us appreciate the bigger picture, seeing where these characters came from, how they became so iconic, and what makes them so memorable. At the same time, the comics can also expose us to stories that will likely never find their way into a movie, a video game, or a kid's cartoon. And not just because certain elements from the comics haven't aged particularly well. But with this dynamic in mind, let's talk about King in Black, a Marvel crossover event from 2020 that would probably never work outside the comics. But it's one of those special stories that works so beautifully in comic form and takes full advantage of everything the medium has to offer. Written by Donny Cates and with art by Ryan Stegman, this story revolves around Venom, Eddie Brock, and the mythos surrounding the symbiotes. But even though they're the central characters, this is not solely their story. The sheer scope and scale of King in Black requires that it affects every corner of the Marvel Universe, from the streets of New York City to the furthest depths of the cosmos. And at the heart of that story is Knull. But before I get into who Knull is and why he matters, let me make one thing clear. Knull is one of the best villains Marvel has created in the past 20 years. Yes, I admit that's just my opinion. I'm sure others would respectfully disagree, but after reading King in Black, I doubt anyone could convince me otherwise. I'm willing to say that Knull is a villain on par with Doctor Doom, Thanos, and Kang, but he's also the kind of villain who probably wouldn't work in any movie or TV show, especially with the way he's portrayed in King in Black. Because you see, Knull is the god of the symbiotes. And no, that's not a metaphor. He is their literal capital G god. And he's not a very nice god either. Because Knull is the manifestation of the darkest darkness that existed in the early universe. Before there was any light, life, or hope of any kind, there was Knull. He was all there ever was and all there ever would be, and he liked it that way. And now, he has a chance to revert everything back to the darkness, and he intends to use it. And the symbiotes that worship him are the key to that effort. This is where Venom and Eddie Brock come in. He's the one who senses that Knull is on his way. He more than anyone knows how dangerous and powerful Knull is. On top of that, Eddie's son Dylan senses it too. That means he's also a target. Now, at this point in the Venom comics, Eddie Brock has undergone a fair amount of upheavals. The story about him and his son Dylan have been unfolding throughout the course of Donny Cates' run. And that's a great story in and of itself. If you're at all curious, I highly recommend you check that story out. But you don't need to know too many of the particulars to appreciate King in Black. The only detail that matters is that Dylan is a big part of Eddie's life now, but Eddie doesn't know the first thing about being a good father, having not had the best home life himself. And when the story begins, he's still trying to build a foundation between them. And all the while, the Venom symbiote continues to complicate things. It too has a stake in this relationship. What happens to Eddie affects it and vice versa. How they even begin to navigate this situation is messy to say the least. But then Knull enters the picture, and when he arrives, he is not the least bit subtle. There really is no elaborate plan, there's no vast conspiracy or cunning subversion. Knull just arrives on Earth on the back of a giant symbiote dragon and proceeds to encase the planet in a shell of symbiotes, surrounding everyone and everything in darkness. Trust me, it's even more badass than it sounds. It's basically the cover of every 80s heavy metal album in comic book form. And it sets the stage for a fight that's big in scale, but still very personal to Eddie Brock. And that scale effectively requires that all of Marvel's heavy hitters join in the fight. The Avengers assemble, the X-Men join in, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and even the Silver Surfer play a part. And every part matters. Knull has armies of symbiotes at his disposal, symbiotes that can infect everyone and turn them into his pawns. Beyond just being menacing as hell, it gives Ryan Stegman plenty of opportunities to craft beautiful, symbiote-laden renderings of multiple characters. It also creates this dark, menacing ambience that perfectly complements Knull's menacing form. Being the symbiote god of darkness, the tone and style fits perfectly, and the story that unfolds throughout the spectacle is just as remarkable. Again, it's not a very complicated story, nor does it try to be. The battle lines are simple. It's Venom and Marvel's mightiest heroes against the full army of Knull. But fighting back against Knull and defeating him are two very different things. This is not just a story about the heroes battling against overwhelming odds. There are other machinations in play, largely around Eddie, Venom, and their connection to the symbiotes as a whole. There are also plenty of complications and setbacks along the way. Knull isn't just an overwhelming force. He is devious on a level that would give Loki a run for his money. And at no point does he give the impression that he's arrogant or short-sighted. Remember, he's a frickin' god, a divine personification of darkness and death. Defeating him requires feats beyond force, superpowers, or magic hammers. And that effort is weaved perfectly into the almost non-stop action that unfolds in every issue. Once Knull arrives, King in Black rarely slows down. Every moment counts and every detail matters. Eddie Brock is still the key, but he doesn't actually do most of the fighting. He needs every other Marvel hero, including those he's clashed with in the past, to fight alongside him. He also needs their help in protecting his son. Because even though the world is at stake here, that personal element is still central to the story. King in Black may be big in terms of scope and scale, but it never feels too disconnected from the major characters involved. That's something you don't often get in big-scale spectacles like this. Usually, if a threat is big enough to warrant involvement by the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and the Avengers, it quickly devolves into a generic good versus evil battle. And while that dynamic is definitely present in King in Black, the story still never gets derailed by the spectacle. The role of every character involved never gets devalued. There is plenty of substance to go along with the style, depth to go along with the action. And the way it ends, I won't spoil it, but I'll just say that it is so satisfying. Seriously, if you love awesome visuals, epic world-spanning battles, alien gods ripped straight from the cover of 80s heavy metal albums, or just superhero battles that we'll probably never see in a live-action movie, I highly recommend King in Black. As always, I'll leave an Amazon Comixology link in the description. And even though this comic revolves around the literal god of darkness, this is one of those special comics that'll brighten your day as well as your collection. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Stay tuned for more of my comic book gems, and please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and stay safe.